He took it? Okay, same stuff. All right, let's kind of get back at it.
Okay, we're ready?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm gonna show you
Gene,
lots of pictures of that.
Gene, we will want a few minutes before we leave, before we shut down. Try to stop before 11. We want to get a satisfaction survey up on the QR code.
Okay. Okay.
No, it should take
Can you
about
do that ahead, or can you do that now, or
Oh, Anthony, can we do that now?
then people can do whatever? I don't know how that works, but yeah, take a picture of it and then do the, okay. So
Gene, you know what? I know how to do that. I know how to do a QR code.
I've done them, but not a lot. You know, they keep pushing me in technology to the point where I'm doing all my own bookkeeping. I'm doing all my own everything because
no.
it can all be done electronically. You can do
no.
everything now. It's like I lose travel because I don't have the time to, figure out all the systems. It's like, this is stupid.
We need to get you one of these grad assistants back here to help you out.
I do have some of those sometimes. We're not allowed to make grad students work that way, Keith.
Oh, what? What?
What slide were you on? Do you remember?
Keep going back. That was pretty early. Yep, there.
This one?
Right about there. Yeah, that's good.
The QR code is the last slide on this presentation now. Okay. So
Oh, oh, you put it on there. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So good sighting. Always think about that. I'm not clicking. Or am I? I'm not going forward at all. Okay, there we go. So this is, these are beds. There's a bed there, 24 inches of material.
Wow, I like it, yeah.
This was on an Indian reservation in New Mexico where they were doing Day of the Dead slaughter. And they had all the sheep guts and everything. So we made a good bowl of carbon. And then we were able to dump all the guts in there, and that slowly absorbs into that carbon, and then we just covered it up. And that's how we do a lot of liquids. I was just saying I worked Hurricane Florence where we had swimming pools full. The barns became swimming pools when all the floodwaters came in. We had hundreds of barns that just were full of dead birds in liquid. So we needed to pump those out. We put them in these big things that I call volcanoes, much bigger than this one. So we make a huge volcano with carbon, and we slowly put, and I probably put 50, 60,000 gallons of liquid birds into some of these volcanoes. Let it soak in, maybe even add some carbon into the bowl, and then once everything's soaked in, then all that material was taken out to the field and put into windrows. So that's how we managed the water. Sometimes we actually took the carbon and put it in the barn and then mucked everything out. But then you're doing a lot of different duties there. So it just depended on what equipment we had to work with. Carbon is the most important thing. Our DEC will even pay our farmers. I have pots of money that farmers can spend $1,000 on moving chips to their farm so that they have the right ingredients when they have dead animals. So we do that with a lot of stuff, and it was important enough that they were able to give me $10,000 to say, okay, let's get some chips where they need to be. So people can practice when there's a small-scale outbreak, and then they can know what to do when there's a large-scale outbreak. We had a situation where, I may have a slide in here of it, where we had a farm that had an explosion in the barn, and it burned, the explosion and fire, and they lost 100 cows real fast. And I wasn't on site yet, but I had talked to NRCS and Soil and Water and Extension and all of the powers that be that need to come in for these things. And we had done enough training in New York that they just like magic, all those wood chips came from the municipality and went right to that farm. They had all 100 cows into those piles before I even got out there. So it was a slick operation, and then we just left them for a couple of years, and I pulled samples and monitored to see what was happening through that. But we have operations where we have 1,000 cows in piles in windrows. So we have some centralized facilities where we take that 4% and we'll bring them to one central location and compost that. The diet's all wrong when we start. The carbon is separate from the nitrogen, but in very quick order, the microbes work their way out of that body and start infiltrating within 3 days. They're really mixing majorly in those piles, and everything becomes more of a compost than a digester with carbon around it. We often will pierce the rumen because if we don't, or the stomach, if we don't, a lot of times, especially down here, you get hot temperatures, hot days, those animals are going to blow up. They're going to inflate and blow up. And we've seen that happen. I'll tell you a funny story. Well, to some people it's a funny story. But in Japan, there was a whale that had died, and the university decided that they wanted to do a necropsy on it, see why that animal died. So they put it on a flatbed and they hauled it. It wasn't a huge whale like the other one, but they hauled it on a flatbed truck. It got to the middle of the city and it blew up. Bicycles, cars, people were covered with all this stuff, and they still have an oily spot on that street from what I've heard, where it actually, because you've got a lot of fat in a whale. So we got the grease spot right there, so we know where it happened.
That's with the rendering process.
Yeah, or something. We've blown up whales before too, but that doesn't work very well at all. We saw that one. So potential farms. Sometimes we will use animal bedding, waste feed, manure, straw, spent feed, and those are all good compost ingredients. They're not necessarily the best ingredients for mortality composting. We can use them as covers. We can use them, but we really can't use them below. And yesterday I said something about cover can blow off of a pile. It does. When we use really light material, just a dry straw or something like that, a lot of times the winds will be high and it'll blow the cover off for that reason, especially in the beginning of the process. And you said you don't have a ton of rain down here sometimes, so that would happen.
I'm just thinking, I know everything's about wood chips. Down here, we're starting to get a lot of, we saw a whole barn full yesterday of the hemp stalks. Is that
The hemp stalks
good,
would
you
be
think?
very
Just like
good.
chips?
They would be very good. One of the problems with hemp stalks, and Dr. Lucas would tell you this, is regulatorily wise, we have to make them irretrievable. So that's why even us handling them the other day, what could have been a problem. And I have to do the same thing in New York. We're making them irretrievable. That would absolutely fit as long as you didn't have to bring them too far off the operation to do that. So we actually have chipped hemp. We've chipped cannabis stems and stuff like that, and we have some in bokashi. I'm doing a video right now on making it irretrievable. So that'll be available, I don't know, next year sometime when we finish filming. But we're looking at windrows, bokashi, some of the other mixed methods that you can use, and incorporation. So if I just field incorporate those, I've put a lot of dirt in that, and nobody's going to end up getting it. The reason that they want everything irretrievable is they don't want people getting in there and taking the stuff and then lacing it. with fentanyl or something like that. That's one of the big problems that we worry about with having cannabis growing in different places. And I'm not an advocate, or I don't have an opinion, really. I think kids are getting it too young. That's about all I'll say. Kills too many brain cells. But
They also laced that marijuana with embalming fluid.
yes, yeah, all kinds of crap. It's like, or locker room. That stuff that you put a little drop in the whole locker room, and it's toxic as hell, you know. Anyway. Carbon to nitrogen ratio, like I said, it's all wrong, but it does work out in the end. One of the things that we do to make sure that we have our carbon sources is we give people this little survey so that they can find out where the carbon is. We do have carbon maps and compost maps on our website. So the front page of our website, when you hit that, you can go right into the maps and see where all of our compost facilities are. We don't advertise. We use it as a connectivity tool. So if I have feedstock that I want composted, I can alert somebody, tell them that I want to give them this, or I want to pay a tip fee to get rid of this. If I want a certain compost, I can go and get that certain compost and use it on certain crops, whether it's organic or mortality or whatever. So it's a tool so that people can use it. It is on Google. It's on Google Maps. And we've started it on other platforms, but it ended up on Google Maps because everything ends up there. But anyway, having access to all this stuff is really important. And just one more story, I do a lot of roadkill composting, and when DOT composts, they always compost right. It's taken farmers eons to learn to compost the mortality properly. And that's because DOT has dead deer and wood chips. That's all they have. They don't have all the other stuff in between, the in-betweens and all that kind of stuff. And even when DOT does it wrong, it works. They'll fill in their row middles, but they have that leeway because they have so much airflow in their piles that they can add more in their row middles and just clog everything up, which would clog everybody else's up. When we just bury them in silage, they'll get hot pretty fast, but it will also cause a wetter mess, and it doesn't work quite as well as having wood chips. So we almost, for butchers, we mandate wood chips. You can't do it if you're not using wood chips. And most of the farms have to do that, and most of our guys have evolved to that. If they said, no, I'm using my on-farm materials, I'll say, okay. And then they'll say, oh yeah, Gene, I switched to wood chips because it was really sloppy and I didn't like the way it was working. So we have the people, our local people, our farmers or whoever, fill these out so that in an emergency they know where to call to get some stuff. Making friends with DOT people, cable companies, all that kind of stuff, that's going to get you wood chips. Your landscapers, you may have to chip their material, but that's going to get you wood chips also. So they're out there. And you can make your own. Like if you have a lot of trash on your facility, on your farm or whatever, a lot of trash trees that you don't want, you can chip them. If you have your cannabis or your hemp stems, you can chip those. And we actually rented a chipper for the videos because our guys are just starting to do all this stuff also. But we rented a chipper for the stems, and we helped them run it one day. So we could take some footage. Place animal and cover. We often encourage the rumen to be lanced. DOT people were really great at that. They just created a spear like boys would, and whoosh. It's like, okay, guys, you're having too much fun now. That actually is a shot of, I didn't realize I had that in there, that's a shot of the New Mexico guts. They filled that bowl in afterwards. wonder where she got that. This is just layering out for our poultry mortality. So basic, put our base down, and the poultry industry, the turkeys, all those guys really wanted to just do 12 inches. And when we got to the big piles, the big stuff, we needed that base. We needed that 24-inch base when we're building any big piles, and I'm talking about big piles. We layer them in, or we create middles. I'll show you the middles in a couple more slides. So what's happening? That heats up, air's coming in, air's going out. So that's the air circulation pattern for all windrows. We basically just are looking at temperature. We just monitor for temperature, but when we have those 100 acres of windrows, somebody is physically going down that windrow and taking temperatures every 10 feet for 2 weeks. We have to do that. So we make sure that we have our time temperature regimes down. And our facilities will do stuff like that as well. When they have to have our regular turned windrow facilities have to have temperature in 5 days over, X amount of time. That also works the same way. So
Gene, is there any technology or Wi-Fi, Bluetooth?
we have data loggers, but they're really expensive. So at this point, we're not there yet. I'm going to be using a data logger soon that can go through the airwaves and go back to my computer. Can come right back to my computer and load the charts right down in my computer. What's happening every day or every minute or every hour or whatever I want it to take a temperature reading. So we do work with those kinds of systems, especially in research. I'll show you a picture of that. We don't want anything ever sticking out. If it's Friday and I have a dead animal, I still have to incorporate it into that pile. We don't want the big piles, we want the windrows. We don't ever want to drive on our beds because we want those beds to aerate. We want them to be loose. We don't want them to be compacted. So we really want that to happen. Well stacked, it's going to, in 12 to 24 hours, we're going to have heat in our pile, 1 month cooked meat. It'll look like a roast if I dig in there. 2 months pretty much digested meat. Digested, all the meat will be gone, most of the hide, some of the hair, some teeth will still be behind. And then in 3 to 4 months, we'll have pretty clean bones. The process isn't done then. The process is still working. That pile still might be hot, but we've sanitized it. And in fact, in the avian influenza, we've probably sanitized those piles in 10 minutes. We just need the temperature. We just need to give that pile a temperature. So, and we only have to get to about 110 is what we figure for the avian influenza virus. Different things kill at different temperatures, and that happens to be what it is for the bird flu. Reuse the bones. We'll reuse the bones and bases for large livestock because they'll create more structure and allow more air to go through, and they're not going to break down that fast. A horse takes probably 15 years for those bones to go away. They're so calcified, so dense. And same as happens with humans and others. Young animals will have green sticks, so their bones will be softer and flexible, and they actually will go very quickly. If I put a stillborn calf in a pile, you won't find anything in a month. Nothing. We had a brucellosis sui outbreak, brucellosis in pigs. We had to depopulate 180 pigs, and we had all sizes, as you can see, all varieties. We were taking tissue samples here to confirm how long the disease was still in the pig. and to make sure who was infected, who wasn't, just so the veterinarians have to come in and deal with all that kind of stuff so that we can cover them up and kill any of the pathogen, any of the brucellosis that's in there. And this happened to be in a 90-degree time period in New York. It was really hot. We still have to have our full PPE on, and we were extra cautious here because the reason that these were just small pig farms. Small, like with 100 feeder pigs and stuff like that on them, but there were plenty of pigs. But the person and the dog, so the owner of the pigs on the farm and a German Shepherd got the brucellosis, and that's how they knew that they had a problem. So an old country doctor saw the symptoms and said, I think this is like brucellosis. It doesn't usually happen in humans and stuff like that, but we can catch it. So it is very contagious, so we really had to be totally PPE'd. We got to move these animals. They're heavy. So they were killed over on the other side and brought over to the windrow. They go into 2 layers. This pig had come from the herd and ended up in Maine as a stud. So I know the Maine composters. We figured out where that pig went, and they tracked it down, and their government destroyed that pig. So that pig was also composted on another site. We didn't bring it back, but we didn't want to keep perpetuating, especially if he was a stud. He would have spread it to a lot of other animals. We're using hay and straw on the top. We were only able to get 1 tractor-trailer load of wood chips because it was holiday time. It was Labor Day or something like that. And I get them right from the landfill, but the trucking was $500 or $600, and this was 10 years ago, 10 years ago at this point. So that was $500 then. Now I can pay $2,000 a load in some disease outbreaks. And luckily, somebody else pays that bill. They're actually putting stakes around the animal, this particular pig, on the edges where the feet are and the tail and the nose, so that they make sure they get their 24 inches around everything. We don't want it. We want that 24 inches around everything. A leg sticking out is not going to be helpful. So we did 2 layers of the pigs, and we did do some baby pigs that were actually euthanized because the whole herd was getting crazy. The mothers don't like the babies taken away from them and all that kind of stuff, and everything had to be destroyed. So they were actually euthanized. These were captive bolt killed, so we take a bolt and put it through the skull, and then I don't want to get much further. We have to scramble their brains, basically, after that. And the veterinarians do all that work. It's very harsh work on people. People don't like to have to do that kind of stuff. So we've laid out that windrow. This is the farm. We took them off of this one farm because it was too wet and moved it to a farm that's a dairy farm, but they have an area that's away from the farm. They knew how to compost. So they're away from, we've chosen a sand bed away from the area on their farm still and did all the work down there. So they were far away from the cows and everybody else. Oxygen in, CO2 out. Good temperatures. We have all kinds of resources. You've got one there. That's me. Just as a recap, select a good site, prepare base, place animals and cover. Young animals or small animals, we tuck the babies in the legs, in between the legs of the big pigs, so that we'd have kind of more even layer, because we want that evenness. How high can you stack animals? People always ask me that. When it's chickens, it's only about 12 inches, and then you do another layer. So you put more carbon on, and then another layer of chickens, and carbon, and another layer of chickens, and then you cap the whole thing. Let it sit 4 to 6 months. This is for livestock. Chickens, we do a little bit differently. And chickens, we might do some turning. One of the problems in 2015, we had our first avian influenza outbreak, and we didn't know how to function. We never had an outbreak, so that was, there was no, no memory there. So we learned how to do things, and we were trying to do all of our composting in barns. But then we ended up with layer barns, and it's not possible to stay in the barns with layers. So for the most part, I was working on turkeys almost exclusively in that one. And we were able to keep those in barns. Then we aren't spreading the disease. We're not bringing things out. But that farm wants to get into production as quickly as they can afterwards. So we have to give them timetables of what they can do. So we built the piles, large piles in 200-yard or 100-yard barns. And we had barns, them all down the middle. We then needed to get them out of those barns. So if we ended up getting good temperatures in our piles for 2 weeks, 10 days even, we'd need the high temperature for 10 days, but we'd leave them in for 2 weeks, then we could take that medium and we could move it outside the barn. So, and we don't want to move it far outside the barn. I want to move it like right next to that barn so that we're not moving any avian influenza very far. Because if the whole thing didn't reach temperature, we can have avian influenza in that still. So that constitutes a turn going from inside the barn to outside the barn. And we did turn in those situations. We got on the idea that we should be turning in 2 weeks because of those situations. And I think we went in the wrong direction with the avian influenza, because now we are turning at 2 weeks. When we have temperature, we're turning at 2 weeks. And it's not that I'm worried about avian influenza at that point. I'm more worried about there still being flesh in there, and it still being odoriferous and getting a lot of odor out of those piles. So I really would like them to be waiting a month or two, but we have crews that come from all over the country to do this work. And if they have to do the turning, the setup, the implementation, the turning, it's a long time and it's a lot of money. To get these guys out there on the farms. They just clean out barns. They're barn cleaners, basically. And they said, oh, we can do this work. So, and they're from our main crews are North Carolina that we use are from North Carolina and Virginia. Those are the two big scale crews that we use. And as I said yesterday, we rent the equipment for them out there. And USDA APHIS, who deals with Animal Health Plant Inspection Service, they deal with all of keeping us safe from diseases and our plants safe from diseases. So I've been working with them for probably 20 years on this kind of stuff. So we've written the standard operating procedures for birds, and there's a group of us that deal with mortality response. And some of the guys are in Maine, New York. We've got a couple in Canada, a couple in Michigan, Virginia now, North Carolina. We're training people up to be able to respond to these things. It's good money if you can get trained to do it, but it's grueling, grueling work. And my funders wanted to compost me at some point, so I set up that picture for them. So, any questions? I just want to see where we are. Yeah.
I'm just trying to visualize how this would work in a smaller operation like ours. We have the occasional chicken that dies, the occasional sheep, maybe a lamb, live or something. A chicken, seems like I could just throw that in my compost pile just like a just like a melon or something, that I could
Yep.
throw on there. The sheep, I sort of did something, accidental windrow. I had no idea. I didn't know the term. But I put a sheep between a couple fruit trees and piled a bunch of wood chips on it. The only thing I did wrong is I didn't put any chips underneath it, I think.
Yep. Okay.
But is that something that would work just when you have the occasional sheep?
Yes. Yeah.
Because we don't have a dedicated compost
Yeah,
area.
just put it down, what you'll have to do is you'll have to balance your carbon and nitrogen and your mass. We were talking about it with a couple of chickens with the ladies back there. You just have to balance your carbon and nitrogen and have something that is, so build it into a pile that is larger. So 4 by 4 by 4. And that would work down here without any problem. You just, I consider that a haystack pile. So you can do a haystack pile if you don't have a lot of animals. Otherwise, we lasagna them out, as we call it. So we build stair steps, and, I'll have, one of the things that we found out was that the DOT people came in and looked over our shoulders when we were working with all the farmers, because we started with all the farmers, and they're like, well, can't we do this? So they gave us $500,000 actually to explore all of this, to explore all the mortality stuff. And the poultry, dairy people, we have gotten like no money from, but DOT was willing to do it because they knew that eventually they were going to have to be managing their roadkill better. So even Yellowstone National Park manages their buffaloes. So they manage their roadkill from buffalo, and we set them up a long time ago. I work with Montana and Idaho and a bunch of states to do training like I'm doing here with you guys. We usually have a group of people that'll come in, farmers, composters, and regulators and stuff, and we'll get everybody up to speed on all of the stuff so that the regulators hear what I'm saying as well as know what you're doing when I tell you not to. I got into a situation where I was on the phone with the judge, and I'm like, somebody had done something wrong, and it was a rendering facility. They were composting right outside of the rendering facility, and our DEC, our Department of Environmental Conservation, came in and said, well, you're not composting because you're not turning. And I'm like, wrong. So they turned, and it's downtown in the Utica area in New York. And it's isolated, but it's still like in the center. And they had odor issues. So I said, bury it in carbon right now. And in October, we will think about taking everything out. So we use all that carbon as a biofilter. We'll put that 24-inch biofilter over it because we're having odor issues. And our DEC, our waste people in DEC, not the enforcement people in DEC. So this was an enforcement person that hadn't gotten the word. Our waste people know that, and we sat in a workshop just like this and said, oh yeah, we should be burying these odor problems in carbon. So that's what we do now. And even we don't use a lot of compost covers. Like we have a large facility that has the aeration and all that kind of stuff. And they say, oh, use your compost covers and all that kind of stuff, which are a pain to take on and off. They do work, but they're a pain to take on and off because they're very heavy and they do blow, but they can blow away. So we use the chips as that filter. So, and we can make things work just fine.
I have a couple other questions. One is, we have a ton of calorie pair in this area. I don't know if
A
you
what?
know calorie pair. Calories, the invasive pears. And we...
Oh, invasive pear, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it's
okay.
a pear, but the problem is they're a carrier for fire blight.
Okay.
Is all that temperature pretty much the same that'll kill all the pathogens? I've always been kind of concerned about
Yes.
chipping up calorie pear and putting it on around my fruit
Yep.
trees.
Yeah, we often often growers will err with blights and all that kind of stuff, will err on the conservative side. We will go ahead and put it into a municipal composting system and take care of all of the pathogens, the blights, all that kind of stuff.
And then the other one is we have our black walnut is growing like weeds around here. And
You can compost the black walnut.
yeah, it has I've seen various things about
Yep.
how that affects.
It's
Things.
it's an allelopathic plant, so it
Yep.
wants to kill the things that are under it. And I should have given you this right in the beginning. I deal with anything that was live and is now dead and needs to be managed. Okay, that can be plant, it can be animal. And if it was alive, and it wasn't like a plastic that's been manufactured and stuff like that, live and now dead, I can manage it. Anything can be mineralized. Anything will go back into the composting process.
Yeah, I'm thinking
And
more
will
of the
kill-
use of it. Do I want to put that around my apple trees? You know, that's
Yeah.
the question.
Once it's composted, it loses its allelopathic
It does, okay.
effects.
That was my
So
question.
all the wood, all the nuts, the balls, all that stuff. And I've done it with a lot of different things, including poison ivy, the urushiol, to look at that in the process, through the processes. And we can transform all of those things into a sterile thing. The only thing that we can't do is prion diseases. We don't know if we can kill prion diseases, but every other pathogen at this point, every other bacterial, spore, all that stuff can be killed in the compost process. With prion diseases, mad cow and chronic wasting disease and scrapies, the reason that we're more careful about that and we use those alkaline digesters that I had up in the beginning is because it's the only way for us to dissolve that protein chain. It's a misfolded protein chain. So you'd say, okay, we should be able to compost that. We should be able to burn it. We should be able to do all kinds of things. If we don't burn it at 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, we will not disable that prion. So when the UK burned all of those cows on pyres with mad cow, that had mad cow, they ended up getting more of that prion in their soil. So the ash, it would be in the ash still, and it would be in the soil. So they're very, very gun-shy about doing any composting. They don't do a lot. We have people from UK that work with us on this stuff, but they're really gun-shy about doing anything with composting because they don't believe that it can work.
Yeah, funny story about wood chips. We have plenty of wood chips. Mm-hmm. We made the mistake. We told a tree service that we would take every wood chip they had.
And you're
And
buried.
I knew I was in trouble. They looked at each other and smirked. And they were bringing us 1 and 2 loads a day. And yeah, that was pretty good. I finally had to swallow my pride and tell them to stop.
I probably have enough.
We got wood chips.
But if you're a large farm with livestock, you can use quite a few. We've, yeah. There's another group that's supposed to be around called chipdrop.com. And they're supposed to drop chips to households if you want them, if you sign up. I haven't gotten any in the rural areas, and my research assistant hasn't gotten any. She's really rural. I think you have to be in the urban areas, and then you don't want so many wood chips. So it's harder. But I'll just go down the highway, go down my road, and say, you know, when the cable companies or when other guys are there, and I'll just tell them to dump some down my bank so that I have them to work with for the 2 deer and the raven that I have in my compost pile right now. They were just, the dog was getting into them. They were roadkill, so. Oh, we need to get there.
Okay, all right.
I forgot.
All right, good deal. Thanks, Gene. Here, folks, Thomas from K-Card put together a survey. We want to see how things evolve. So if you can just go ahead and link up to this QR code and take a minute or two and complete that. And then, Gene, we're going to pack up and then head to the farm.
We're going to head out to the farm and just finish building those piles. We have some more food and other stuff if people want to go. People don't want to go,
Now, you can put them to work doing that, though, right?
That we can.
Okay. Well, Kathy and I will head out, and we'll leave about 11:30. We got an appointment in Louisville at 1, so we want to make certain that we're going to be there. The other thing is that a few of us have asked to come out to our farm to visit it in January. When Thomas sends out the link and all that sort of stuff, we will put that into the email, so we'll welcome you out. It's going to be January the 20th, and Kathy's not in here, but if you come out, we'll see to make sure she has something for us to eat. Meanwhile, right? You smile. Nobody else, the women didn't smile, but you smiled. And again, let's thank, oh, Jen, I don't know if you can.
Books and stuff, that's all taken care of?
The books are taken care of. We got a couple there. And Gene, we gifted Gene a basket and some Kentucky bourbon to our token of our appreciation for her coming down and imparting with her wealth of knowledge. And folks, I didn't realize who this lady really was or is.
She doesn't know either.
And you probably can tell we've been really blessed with her presence. And so I don't know if we can ever be grateful enough for you being here, Gene. So thank you.
I enjoy doing this. I really have no trouble coming out and doing these kinds of things. I enjoy it. You guys make the world go round.
Okay, we're gonna pack that up, put it in the truck.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so we can get help from everybody. Where's your truck parked?
In this side parking lot.
Is it working? I don't know.
What's 100 miles north of it? Is that about Watertown? Is that about where you live?
I live at this
Yes.
Watertown, sorry.
Everything is coming to Thomas.
Right on the